Hello, welcome to the Machine Ethics Podcast. This month we have a bumper episode where we're recording from cogX 2017 in London, where we were invited to go along and check out the speakers and talk to people about the future of AI. At cogX.co you can find information about cogX, the AI Innovation Exchange and annual awards, bringing together thought leaders across more than 20 industries domains to address the impact of AI. I went along to cogX for 2 days, where I also met Josie Swords, who joins me now. Hi Josie.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Hi Josie. So you were there over the 2 days of the conference, talking to people and participating in the different sessions. Is there anything that stands out of the idea of what this conference was trying to achieve or kind of portray in the media?
Yeah, it very much felt like the conference was trying to bring together all the different people who are working in AI across lots of different sectors, and I guess get them in the same room and get them talking on the same page, really, because there was a really nice diversity of topics that sort of AI was being threaded throughout the whole conference, like transport, ethics, that kind of stuff. It was cool.
Yeah, I think some of the themes that I got out of the sessions were ethics generally, definitely. Collaboration, diversity was a big one. Data for good, personal data, data bias. Jobs loss came up quite a few times. Educating people to use the tools, and a huge amount of investment going into AI in the industry at the moment. I was just wondering if you kind of felt like we were doing enough, or there's enough talk about kind of AI at the moment and the repercussions, because it's quite a trendy topic.
Yeah, definitely. It was very much a conference of believers, even if that was sort of expressed in different ways. And I think as well, it was a room full of believers, but also thinking about, well, who might be missing from this conversation. So a lot of things that I saw coming up was, what's the role of government here? And they had the Minister for Innovation, I think it was, and they had Lord Young speaking. So, they was there, but didn't feel like, I guess, the role of government. I didn't feel like I had any clarity on that coming out of cogX, but it did come up a lot.
Yeah, so some really great conversation, but not necessarily something concrete that you can take away with you just yet, maybe?
Yeah.
So, we talked more about your research at the end of the podcast in your vox-pop. I was just wondering if there's anything else that struck you about the conference while we were there over the 2 days, any themes or subjects?
I think what really struck me was such a breadth of people. So I met someone from PwC, and then I met someone who's in Oxford who's doing biomedical research. It just was like a really big mix of people, and I guess illustrated to me all the different industries that are using AI. So I think that was something that I wasn't really expecting, actually. I thought I was going to meet many more developers and kind of tech heads and stuff like that, but didn't really seem, I don't know, maybe they were just avoiding me. I didn't. But yeah, I think, that's what I was expecting, which, I didn't end up meeting that many people from those backgrounds.
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of like AI in business and showing all the different practical uses of AI. And though there was some techies there, I think it was much more of a coming out of how we can use AI in the real world sort of thing.
Definitely.
Okay, well, if you need to find out any more information about cogX, go to cogX.co. They will be releasing some more audio and video from the conference over the coming weeks, so check that out. We have a small bit of recording from Lord Young later on, but I would really check out the longer version if you can. We're going to start with a little bit from Charlie and Tabitha from the introduction to the conference, and then a small section of Sean O'Haggerty from Cambridge Centre of Existential Risk. Then we've got a couple of vox-pops from people who attended the conference, some of Lord Young's speech, and then some of the ethics session right at the end of the podcast. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening. Bye.
So this conference, and just to frame the conversation that we want to help move forward, is really about narrow AI and vertical AI. We're not going to ignore superintelligence, but we're going to put that into the background and really focus on what can be done today. And not just today, but for the next 3 years. So what's the impact of AI on industry, on government and society for the next 3 years? But this industry is not without its challenges. In the area of ethics, there's a big question as to how do we train artificial intelligence? Of course, the answer is with data. And the next question is, where did that data come from? And is it representative of our current population and our thoughts and our actions? And how does that make us feel when we hold a mirror up to ourselves? Is that how we'd like AI to behave, like us? So there's a lot of questions around ethics in AI and how we're actually setting ourselves up here. There's a lot of questions around rights. So we have rights today to privacy, security, to be in control of our own destiny, our own lives. And how do those get impacted by AI? Who does have access to my data? Obviously, AI is driven by data. Do we want AI to have access to some data, but do we want to always have access to our data? And then, of course, fairness. Having fair access to the technology. In telecoms and energy, we have the concept of universal access, but also fair access to the economic benefits. And what does that actually mean? And is there a change required to the current social contract that we have, getting educated, working, and then retiring through the course of our life? So some huge opportunities and some huge challenges. So what we're trying to do at this conference is help everybody here get back to those questions of what is AI, but more importantly, what will its impact be on industry, on government, society, and on each of us?
We mentioned Terminator earlier. Do you have a vision for AI in the future? Is it a rosy one, or do you feel like we're heading in the wrong direction?
I think we're heading in a certain direction and we cannot go back. And there's these two camps, the doomsday sayers and the enthusiasts. And just because I'm an optimist in general, I like to see the good in what it can do. And so far it has proven to be really good. And I continue to believe that. But it's certainly something we have to keep in mind and make sure to know what our systems are doing and not just blindly proceed with them, definitely.
Samir.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Samir.
Thank you, Ben.
It's our view that one of the really important things we need to bring together people who have deep expertise in these different areas who aren't necessarily always talking to each other. So it's a collaboration between Cambridge Machine Learning Department, led by Zubin Garamani on the one hand, and also the Humanities Department on the other hand, and we have spokes in other universities. But really the aim is get people from sociology, economics, machine learning, policy, all into the same place, talking to each other regularly. It's our view that these advances are going to come faster and faster, and the people who actually know what they need to know about the different angles of this need to be talking to each other all of the time in order to keep up with these advances, rather than trying to adapt to it retrospectively when a technological advance happens. Well, I don't know if there's any specific one breakthrough. So, as David alluded to, I mean, the really big breakthrough or set of breakthroughs will be the ones that led to true artificial general intelligence. Everything that we've achieved on the Earth so far, and we have completely transformed the planet, is a product of our intelligence. And so if we are able to create intelligence that have our ability to operate in a wide range of environments, not just solve problems, but formulate new problems and then figure out how to solve them, engage in true creativity, and make scientific advances beyond what we can do ourselves, I think nothing could possibly compare to that. I mean, that's a real sort of civilizational change that might be beyond anything before, including the Industrial Revolution. However, as you pointed out in your talk, we don't know how far away that is, and some people like yourself are ambitious and say 5 to 10 years, but I've spent the last couple of years speaking to experts in a whole load of areas, and some are as optimistic as you are. Many think it's considerably further away. Some people, like for example, you probably know Maggie Bowden very well, is quite skeptical and thinks that actually general intelligence is much more conceptually difficult than we really realise, and that we might still be hundreds of years away. With that said, I think we can't be complacent. I mean, advances are going so quickly at the moment that maybe this will creep up on us quite soon, and people should be doing work on it. However, as you both pointed out, even before we get to that point, I think that narrow artificial intelligence and also the artificial intelligence that we're developing, which will have an increasing level of generality without being true human intelligence, is going to have really important impacts on so many of the big challenges that we face.
What's an example of something that it could be in the relative short term?
On the top level, a lot of the big challenges we're going to face are ones that involve huge amounts of information and complex interconnected systems. And it's a little bit hard for us as people to really make sense of all of this information and these very complex systems. So if you think of anything that involves huge amounts of information and complex systems, then we need these tools to help us deal with it. So I'm really interested, for example, in the impacts on how we generate and use energy. We have a huge problem with climate change.
Yeah.
We are not meeting targets. There's this ambitious 1.5 degrees, but if you read through the IPCC's plans, if you read through the commitments, it doesn't look like it's actually going to reach it. But if you then look at the production and the use of energy and the production of CO2, every single step along the path can be attacked with AI and machine learning in some way. There are projects doing really interesting work on basically hooking up solar photovoltaic plants with fossil plants with meteorological data to make the production of energy from these sources more efficient. Google DeepMind recently applied a variant, I believe, of their Atari algorithm to Google server farms to optimize energy use. And that's something that people put a lot of effort into, and yet they were able to drop the energy use by 30 to 40%. Now that's the energy output of a town or a city, and you could then imagine, rolling that up to, the UK energy grid, for example, or the US energy grid, and suddenly it drops down.
So, Stefan, what do you think is the future of AI, or what are the things that really excite you about AI at the moment?
Well, hopefully not anything like Gattaca or Minority Report or anything like that. I think what excites me about AI is that even with the volume of investment and research and commerce going into it, I don't think we've really scratched the surface necessarily. But there's been a lot of discussion today about potential applications, which, to be fair, I don't think we necessarily understand the breadth of that at this point. So that's potentially the most exciting thing. I think there are some interesting ethical questions, given this is an ethics podcast. And I think some of those include, say, one of the concerns that you get from the media often is, AI is putting people out of jobs. So is it going to increase the wealth gap? But at the same time, I think that AI is also creating a lot of jobs. And AI is such a broad term that the variety of uses for it are so wide that it's not very easy to pin on a particular industry. So I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think it's a realistic view that AI is removing jobs. I suspect, in fact, it's going to contribute to a better quality of life. And probably it's already generated at least one or two, relatively nascent industries.
You're looking on the brighter side of that kind of coin, if you like.
Yeah, I am. I mean, as a data protection lawyer, a lot of the concerns that we discuss with our clients and that we get just as a perk of the job include concern from people that are suddenly seeing vast amounts of data, including their personal information, used for a very wide variety of applications. And I think there's one issue that needs to be addressed is education and informing people about how their data is being used, why it's being used, and putting them in control of it, which is quite a difficult thing to do from a technical perspective.
I heartily agree.
One of the things that is emerging from the change in regulation and also guidance from the Information Commissioner's Office and that sort of thing is this increased focus on making that information accessible. So talking about things like a layered approach to informing people about how their information is used, just-in-time notices. So just as you're submitting a particular piece of information, that's the time really you should be informed about how it's being used. So while a lot of people have concerns about privacy policies going from 2 pages to 15 or 30, and that really being to protect the businesses that are relying on them rather than informing the people that are reading them.
Yep.
I think in fact we're going to see hopefully the opposite, that they're going to become more accessible, more digestible, and more practical.
Sweet. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Cheers.
What do you think about the future of AI? Do you see kind of a rosy picture of society and
I guess there's such a huge range of what could potentially happen. So like you have the people who the pessimists who are just like it's doomed for all, like Sam Harris for example, and then you have other ones who say it's just going to make everything better. My personal opinion is somewhere in the middle. Something that I'm quite interested in sort of researching more, and is the effect of how these technologies evolve over time in sort of, okay, so you have academia and you have the private enterprise. Within the private enterprise, they own the IPs for a lot of these technologies, but if we're ever going to truly develop something which is AI, there has to be a huge amount of collaboration. So there's going to have to be a huge push for open source and making technologies cheaper. So what that then leads to, if this is the goal that we have of creating a general artificial intellect, is that this has a very deflationary effect on the price. So if this is a trend that we see, what's going to happen to capitalism? Because if prices...
What is going to happen to capitalism?
Exactly. So, if prices are, follow this deflationary pattern, then what's going to happen? We're going to have two types of economics, where we have a planned economy and we have something which is, say commodity markets, which have to operate in sort of a capitalistic sense. So these are sort of the things that when I think about AI are the problems that we're going to have to start facing and address.
So as we start carving away more and more jobs from the market, and perhaps more and more resources are digitized or ubiquitous with cheaper energy and that sort of thing, you think the wholesale capitalistic degrade into some sort of other economy? A new model has to appear, basically.
Yes. So there has to be, there's going to be a, as you said, there's going to be a sort of an initial effect where people start losing their jobs. Then what will happen is there'll be an attempt to start to retrain people, but I don't think everyone can be retrained, because then you're just creating a market which is overly abundant with people, and again what happens, price goes down. So there's going to be maybe two economies, the planned economy, and then there's going to be a resource economy, which is trading for say commodities, for example. And this is probably a trend that we're going to see. I tried to submit the question at the talk here, but it didn't get answered, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully next year, anyway.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Peter Bevington?
Yes.
Bevington, great. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, very good. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. What do you think the future of society, AI, and that sort of thing entails? Come on, Toby, you can solve this. This is your time, right?
The future of AI is, good lord. I think, AI is, there's a lot of talk at the moment about AI as if it's this new thing. And as if we've just invented this thing that will allow us to get rid of all knowledge workers' jobs via, magical machines that are going to run the world. The fact is, the first AI companies started going bust in the early 80s, so it's definitely not a new thing. People are just branding anything that is technology that they don't really understand as AI. You go and talk to the guys who are running this, for example, and they call themselves AI, but they actually say they're machine learning. And they're basically saying it's smart tech. It's where are things which are not just consumer CRUD applications, where things are actually running any algorithms behind the scenes. What are they doing? So I think, there's lots and lots of places in which we are essentially repeating boring knowledge work jobs that will be automated. Currently, you're looking at a lot of stuff in, a lot of entry-level legal jobs. A lot of anyone who was pushing paper for a long time is didn't mean to single out one particular industry, but anyone's pushing paper for a long time, a lot of those will be helped to, will be automated to some extent. But I think a lot of the benefit of that will be that that the people who were just repeating the same jobs over and over again can now focus on becoming better at them. And so those machines ought to be able to help you to repeat the tasks that you were doing over and over again, so that you can focus on telling them how to be better at them. That's my hope anyway.
Okay. Great. Well, Toby, Abel. Thanks very much.
Over to me.
I'm Irene Ng. I am with the HAT Foundation Group. I'm a professor at University of Warwick, who is part of the HAT Foundation Group.
Yep. So you're. So this is not a company.
It's a group. It's a consortium.
Consortium, and so you're producing software which is free.
Yes. So the HAT is a private data account. It's fully open source, and so it behaves like a user account on any app. And so you can just take the HAT technology and build an app on it, and without having to deal with all the full stack and backend and everything. So you just build the service on top of it. And the HAT Foundation Group are universities and startups, whoever want to join and build stuff on the HAT, where the private data account, the HAT, belongs absolutely legally to the person.
Yeah. And the HAT stands for
Hub of all things.
Hub of all things. And it means that I can put my personal data on there.
You can put anything on it. So you can, if there's an API from Facebook and Twitter, so if you go to your HAT today at hatters.hubofallthings.com, you can pull your Facebook data, your Twitter data, your calendar, your photos. So later you get Monzo, Fitbit, anywhere that's an API, you can just acquire it in. So you get data as the app, maybe you're messaging or something, but so does the user. So it's equitable.
Yeah.
Both of you get copies of the same data.
Right. And do you, so if I built something on top of this system, do I have to be can I make a company of doing that? Or
of course. So
I just get consent?
So you can get a company and you build a new app, and many of our app builders build new apps on the HAT, and they actually, the foundation has 3 or 4 capabilities to incubate new apps.
Yep.
If you need help in terms of pitching your idea to bring funding in, talk to Jonathan.
Right.
He's part of the foundation to help startups do that. If you need understanding of the tech and how it flows, talk to Xiao, our CTO. So we have in the foundation CTOs for hire, community and comms people for hire, so that you don't have to have a whole team as a startup. And then we have a tech team that helps you integrate the build on the tech, so that you can come up with an MVP or a very simple something to show.
Yeah.
So literally you can have a startup that goes into a funding round without really having a lot of staff.
Yeah. And for the kind of average Joe public, is this something they have to be educated about? They can roll like a hat up quite quickly and do it themselves, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there are different things. I mean, it gets a bit confusing sometimes, because you go to an app and you have a user account and you sign on like a normal user account. Then you see that it's one corner it says you have got yourself a hat, and then you go check what the hat is and you realize, wait, your user account can go to other apps. Well, let's do that. So they sort of learn gradually that their hat can do this and can do that through using it.
Yeah.
And after a while, I mean, we're quite used to logging in on using Facebook, and so logging in with a hat is no different in that way. But the hat is sort of special in the sense that you do actually have the data and it's yours.
Yep.
So you can then go to another service. And and as it accumulates, you can start buying services that can share bits and pieces. Because every app, you need to do a data debit, like the way you do for a bank, for the data that you're giving to the app.
Yep.
So you will see your data debits, and if you don't want the app to really use your data anymore, you can just cancel it.
Yeah, and they get notified.
Oh yeah. But of course, if you were using an app for insurance and discounts and things, well, you won't get that now. So.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I presume that it tells that company
absolutely
that you don't want that service anymore.
That's right.
and then they
That's
should
right.
be doing something about that.
That's right. It's a bit like an opt-out on the mailing list, actually.
Yeah. And what's the future for the hat project?
The biggest thing for the hat is digital personhood, because if we start collecting all bits of us, we can really make sense of us. And as we get older, these because the database is owned by us, it's our digital asset. It's treated exactly the same as our estate. So our children, when we can buy services, maybe they help with memory, with recall. You don't want to eat that donut. You remember 1995 kind of situation.
Yeah.
You have had AI of me that's completely private, and not that you had to give someone to get AI. So all the cool things that you have on bots and AIs and stuff becomes possible, and you're still private, which is really exciting.
It sounds awesome. Thank you very much for your time, Irene.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So I'm John Prokop. I work in Cambridge University. I also work at the Alan Turing Institute, which is a data science institute in London, which is a bunch of universities. What I mostly work on there is trying to make systems that allow you to run machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms on confidential data, but in an environment where you're not completely trusting the people who own the hardware. And so the idea is to effectively build secure enclaves so that people who don't have the money to buy their own massive data processing can rent it off the usual cloud, but then can be assured that stuff's not going to leak. So that's one thing that we're kind of messing around with. That's not the main reason I'm here. I was involved in this panel to do with AI and cybersecurity, which is, I think, quite interesting. I'm done a bit of work in cybersecurity, less than actually in AI itself. Again, there's a whole bunch of interesting things in that space. So the thing I'm most currently interested in as a sort of technical hobby is some work we've been mucking around with, the transparency of machine learning algorithms. So being able to explain why an algorithm produced the output it produced.
Yeah, so it's mainly neural nets and kind of getting into that black box and seeing.
Yeah, and so there are ways you can feed in things to test the neural net, but you don't really know because there are some weird adversarial cases where the thing will do the wrong thing, and of course the wrong thing might be the classic case is, the poster child example is US sentencing, where you decide whether somebody goes to jail or gets released with a fine based on some machine learning. But there are issues there. Is the thing going to reflect bias because of its training set? Even if you debias it, is it going to rediscover that accidentally somehow? I think the interesting thing with talk to people here, quite a lot of people will have this same discussion. So that's very encouraging because there's a lot of industry types here who, in the tech sector industry type, have been stereotyped as not really paying much attention to ethics. I think that's somewhat unfair. I think there are a lot of people in some tech areas.
Is it though? Is it?
I think a lot of tech people are concerned with ethics. No. I mean, I think there certainly are people that aren't.
Yep.
And there are companies that are pay less attention to corporate ethical behaviour than others. The question is whether really the sort of stereotype CS geek sector is actually worse than anyone else. I mean, people that train as science and engineering people might go into weapons systems. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's just unethical. You could go into defence and not be working in nukes or drone robot killer weapons. And I won't argue with people that do that. We go into cyber defence, but I'm like, I don't have much time for people that go and build better automatic guns. I don't see how that helps the world personally. The two UK things in the Data Science Institute, Turing Institute, are we have a project with the FAR Institute, which is NHS data science people, and the idea is to try to come up with really sophisticated models of healthcare data. And we have all, essentially, I'm going to say we don't look at the data, we can run our algorithms in their secure environment on literally all of NHS Scotland, potentially all patient records to start with, and that means that's completely not a thing that's been seen before. So imagine you discovered everything that's correlated with anything else through 10,000 dimensions of patient record data. that doesn't mean you've got all the causes, but now you know where to look. So imagine, you see there's an increase in diabetes, but it's slower here than here, and there's something different about the age of going to school first, or the typical diet, or the weather in the east versus the west of Scotland, or whatever. It doesn't matter what. Just imagine there's more lightning storms here than there, and there's more asthma here than there. Just things you just have, nobody has, and you just do all of them in one go. So now you have a list of things to start looking at medical explanations for, and also what we call accidental experiments, which are where there was a change somewhere and it didn't happen the same time everywhere, and then you go look and say, oh, well, this may things better or worse, and now we actually can start to think about root cause. So that's a really exciting area where the UK could just totally blow away the whole planet in that space. And you could do it fairly quickly. You could imagine this happening in a handful of years. That would just hugely decrease the cost of healthcare, in a large number of areas. And then the other one is slightly more mundane in a way, but it's also, I think, useful. We're looking at financial data, transaction data from the regulator, from the Financial Conduct Authority, and also from a very big bank. And they're 20% of world transactions. And one of the things, you've got all the organizations in all those transactions. So you can build a social net of those, a graph. And then you could say, if trade increases or decreases on one of these edges between, or all of the set of edges between French and English companies, or Welsh and American companies, just pick random thing, then what is the impact on the overall system? So you have these supply chains. Right? If you look at British car industry, for example, there's 10% of British industry. It's mostly pieces of supply chain. It's not really one single car manufacturer. So they're extremely sensitive to that. So you could run, again, the exciting thing here would be a bit like the healthcare data. You could run a complete model and then say what happens if there's a change.
Yes, and you could hypothetically prod the model.
You do what if. So you could actually answer questions that would be, instead of Project Fear and where you don't like experts, it would be, if you do this Brexit model, what is the actual impact? Without other, of course there are other factors, yes, but at least this piece you can't argue with. Of course, there are external things we don't know about confidence in the market, or there's all these weird things. But then that's a whole other interesting area, but that's not the thing I know how to do. I can imagine somebody injecting behavioural economics and psychology into the system additionally later. That would be very cool.
That's great. Thanks for your time, John.
Not at all. No, sorry. I was drifting there. I woke up at 5 a.m.
Should we see if we can get a drink somewhere then? So what do you think the future of AI is, aside from crossword?
I think one of the things which was mentioned yesterday at the cogX conference was around embedding AI and machine learning technologies into general infrastructures without people actually understanding or realizing they're actually there. So I think that's going to happen quite a lot, to be honest with you. I think when we get to a position where things just happen, that's when it's going to be kind of ubiquitous and stuff. I think the other thing as well is, when we start looking at machine learning and all that, on those kind of things, when it's embedded, we need to start understanding adversarial machine learning. So at the moment, we trust that the data which is going into these algorithms and all the kind of services is legitimate and accurate. What happens when the bad guys get hold of machine learning type activities and machine learning type technologies, and then understand how to mislead those kind of new embedded systems and services? I think that's when we're going to have a bit of a pickle. And I think that's also going to be interesting from a new service perspective, where you need to have security testers who are able to pen test AI systems, which is a whole new market which nobody's really thought about. So instead of just testing the infrastructure and the software, you would actually have to have some kind of mathematical or statistical understanding to pen test the algorithms to be resilient against.
Oh God, I think you've got a business idea on the way.
I reckon I might have there, actually, to be fair, you know what I mean?
That sounds possibly amazing. So you take an AI system, you'd prod the data first, I guess?
Well, so in typical pen testing, so I used to be a pen tester many moons ago, and I think the way
penetration testing, right?
Security testing, so breaking into a system, so ethical hacking, effective. Right? You try and characterize the system, you do some reconnaissance, you try and understand what the system looks like. When you poke it, does it respond, and so on and so forth. If you take that concept into machine learning, how can you then start thinking about things whereby how can I make my machine learning algorithm or AI or whatever do something which I want it to do? So, for example, there's been a couple of big cases over the past 10 years where people have duped AI or machine learning type systems into doing something they want to do. So 4chan is a very good example. There was a guy who set up 4chan who was then promoted to, I think, Forbes 100, the top man, through duping the actual system and duping the recommendation system and stuff like that. If you then transfer that into safety or safety critical systems from an infrastructure perspective, what does that mean when we start looking at adversarial machine learning or adversarial generative learning, those kind of things? So yeah, that's going to be a tricky situation. It's not going to be yet, but it's going to be soon.
Paul Lewis, you've just blown my mind. That's very good. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries, cheers.
So my name is Josie Swords and I'm an MSc student at Goldsmiths. And I'm researching how to embed feminist values into artificial intelligence.
Okay, cool. So what has brought you along to this cogX today? Is there anything that has jumped out at you from sessions that you've seen so far as well?
So I came to cogX to, I guess, get a deep dive into the industry, particularly in England, and to help with my research and sort of wrap my head around the big issues that this industry is looking at the moment. I think the biggest takeaway I had was the precision ethics session, which was looking at diversity and addressing bias in artificial intelligence, and just it was so nice to be in a space where there are a whole lot of other nerds like me having a great time and thinking about this stuff, and also thinking that it's incredibly important for us and for the future of AI. So that was great.
And you were able to ask a couple of questions in the sessions as well, right?
Yes, I got 2 questions in, and they were, I think, the first question was about, what was my first question? Oh yeah, can we change the purpose of AI to, rather than being to make mechanistic humans, but can we, focus on solving global poverty instead? And that was awesome, but I think that was a big question and no one really knew how to answer it, so it was met mainly with silence, which was pretty funny.
I think you got some agreement though, right, from Alan Winfield?
Yes, definitely. And I think someone brought it up in the breakout session as well about, can we look at even just measuring poverty using AI rather than, solving it. But so that was cool, yeah.
So what do you think the future of AI is? And I guess, how do you feel like it is at the moment? And this feeds very much into your research that you're doing in your master's.
I think at the moment the purpose and development of AI is, from probably an ethical or a political or power dynamic perspective, is unexamined. And at the moment we've got a lot of private companies who are just like pumping all their cash into this because you can create products that people want to use, you can make a lot of money that way. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does hold incredible power and it does shape the way society develops. And if you've got all these algorithms that are going to slowly take over more and more of the different things that we use, and they are built on flawed data or assumptions or power dynamics that were unexamined, are therefore replicated in that algorithm and then almost frozen in time and then reproduced in perpetuity. And so I think what we have now is an opportunity to say, well, let's examine it and let's decide what are we happy with? What do we want to build in something that's, assumes we will be biased and corrects us? How cool would that be? If we just by using some algorithms change the gender balance in business in 10 years because of some HR software that introduces gender blind applications.
So it's almost like fighting fire with fire, right? In that way.
Yeah, I think so. These things are always tools, and I think we should all get involved in making this tool work for as many people as possible. And I think from a business perspective, if you could argue to government, we've built a tool that actually eliminates a need for X amount of services because we prevent those issues from happening in the first place, then I think maybe if I was a business and I developed something that was clever like that, I would be saying, give me a great tax break because I've prevented how many people needing to use the NHS this month.
Yeah.
So I think there are so many ways to think about it which can be empowering for both business and for society, but it's just not part of the conversation at the moment.
Thanks, Josie, for being great at being human.
Thank you.
Josie Swords at Goldsmiths College, obviously. Where are you moving to, or what's going to happen after you finish?
Hopefully I pass my course. I don't know. Who knows? I am up for anything.
One of my early jobs after I gave up law was working for Great Universal Stores, at that time the biggest mail-order retail business in the country. And in the mid-50s, I can well remember going into a large warehouse on the floor and seeing stretched away the serried ranks of over 200 people over desks writing out invoices by hand. In 3 years, the following 3 years, every one of those jobs went. But can you imagine a more soul-destroying job to spend your entire working life writing out invoices and carrying on and writing out more and more and more? That wasn't a job loss, that effectively was a job liberation, because the vast majority of jobs that have been lost over the last 50 years because of technology have been a job nobody really wants to do. And that is why technology actually liberates us. Well, you know, Napoleon once derided us as a nation of shopkeepers, and he wasn't far wrong. But over the last decade or two, we've seen another revolution in the shopping habits of this country, and more retail sales take place online, and AI is only going to make that even more irritating. I'm fed up already. I go and look at something on eBay or somewhere, and wherever I go, for the next 2 or 3, I see more and more of exactly the same objects. When you have AI, it will make me suicidal. I'm quite convinced about this. But what that effect is, once again, is a reduction in the number of places, reduction of the number of shops. It's only just starting. And already I believe that Amazon actually used 25% of the warehouse accommodation of this country. But we've done remarkably well as a country. We never talk about it for some reason. Since the financial crash of 2008, we've developed the best startup rate of any major country in the world, better even than the United States. And the last poll I saw of 18-year-olds had a majority wanting to work for themselves, even if they didn't know how. So what we've seen over the last 20, 30 years is a steady, gradual reduction in working hours. We've seen throughout that period a complementary increase in leisure activities, in restaurants, in tourism, that more than made up for the loss of jobs. I'll come on to that. Now, one of the things which you may know, looking here this morning, that people are living a little bit longer than they used to live, and still working, and that's a considerable change in the makeup of our society. And there is absolutely no doubt there'll be a vast increase in the caring professions needed when people start living up to 80, 90 and over 100 as a matter of course. Of course they'll be healthier going later, but there'll be a long period in which they won't. And I read a great deal of tosh, not the only way I can describe it, about machines taking over the caring industries. But you know, the one thing which is the penalty of the old is loneliness. And the one thing that people look is for the touch of another human being. I wonder, could AI actually deliver the illogicality, the plain cussedness, the bad hair days, and all that actually is the spark of humanity? People will not put up with a soulless machine that does whatever they want. They want someone to have a chat with, they want someone to complain to. I promise you, as you get older, you complain. So you want someone to complain to and must listen as well and reply occasionally. So I could see a shift in the work pattern as more and more people actually go to the caring, and it will become a high-paid job because they will have the wealth in society to really. Of course, I accept there are spectacular changes to come. Autonomous vehicles will end the career, I suppose, of delivery drivers, bus drivers, tube drivers, train drivers, even cabbies. It's going to be very boring when you won't have a cabbie to tell you what life is really like and how bad the government is if you've just got an autonomous machine, but all those jobs will definitely go. In the car industry, I'm involved in the car industry in some of the things I do, and they're quite slow in their cycles. But today, not just electric cars, autonomous cars. Once we have autonomous cars, we probably do not need 80% of the number of cars we have today, because most cars spend 80% of their life in the garage. And once you have cars that aren't owned by anybody, you're going to do a lot less. So you will see big changes in manufacturing, you'll see big changes in lots of services. And what is more, they'll come fairly quickly, which is always the problem. So, of course, there are good sides. If technology works, we won't have traffic jams. But I would defy any technology to get rid of traffic jams in London. So we're going to be faced with substantial job losses to come. Now, I've only been considering job loss in Portsmouth by fairly simple AI, because the computer is an artificial intelligence of some sort, once it's programmed. But now there's going to be prospect of job losses by the most highly qualified people in our society, the doctors, the surgeons, even, heaven help us, the lawyers. And that's going to be something we'll all have to live with. But if you look at the world, the medical world, the opportunity of giving every hospital the most qualified and skillful surgeon and diagnostician of world class will only be immense benefits, and that really will be an immense benefit. But if we're going to create a healthy society, and that must be the objective of all of us, what we must not do is allow people, condemn people to being out of work. You know, one of the reasons why I was an outer for 30 years is I could not tolerate countries in the EU seeing youth unemployment, in some cases going up to 50%, 40%. It's a waste of a whole generation of people. And it's easy, if the government sets their mind to it, as long as you can create an entrepreneurial environment, to really set it up. And we have to do that. The enormous growth of new businesses we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years didn't happen by accident. It happened with a concerted effort of a great number of people, both in government and out of government, and we must do it, and we must make sure we continue it. So I see the path ahead being an incredible optimist, is clear. We must introduce AI as best we can. No question. Don't slow it down. We do everything we have to do to bring it there. Because we must take advantage of the enormous qualitative improvements it will make to our way of life and to wealth creation. But at the same time, we have to cherish the entrepreneurial spirit, the ability to innovate and create, and thereby enjoy the best of both worlds, the world of intelligence, both human and artificial. Thank you very much.
What keeps you awake at night when you worry about these sentient robots running around the world?
So, I think the main concern about AI would be public privacy and how it's affected, and how AI can analyze social media, etc. I think there was a company, Cambridge Analytica, I believe it was called, which I think that analysed social media and used it to affect people's political decisions. And I think that's one of the main issues with AI. And also artificial intelligence being used in military, etc. I don't think that would be okay.
Yeah, so what I'm concerned about, I think, is that a lot of people who are working on AI are very enthusiastic and they don't have bad intentions, but they tend to end up working on models or systems that will have harmful effects, and that's because they are not aware of the data that they're training on, for example. But it wasn't their intention, and so that also makes it difficult to prevent, I would say. And And so I think one of my biggest concerns is that AI will increase the inequality in society rather than being a way to move society forward.
So I think my concern is what I was saying earlier, which is actually you end up in this dystopia where people cross over the ethical lines that the public are kind of happy with. You lose public trust, and then you end up in a situation where you can't use AI for all the positives that it could do for society. So actually, we could be using machine learning and AI to improve the hiring decisions that we make, because actually there's a lot of bias already encoded into what we do, if we do it right. And that applies across all sorts of things. You can be using it to predict water shortages, better measure poverty, etc., etc. There are all sorts of things you could do for the benefit of humanity. But to get through that, we've actually got to have a conversation with the public which says, this is what we're planning on doing. Are you happy? Where are the cut-offs? Where do you not want us to go? And I think what I was talking about earlier in terms of data monopolies, I think we've got to rethink the notion of data as being a commons. If you look at, for example, the way that patent law works, companies are given a patent over in the States, something, but it diminishes over time. So after 20 years or whatever, you have to let it go. And I wonder whether we might start thinking about data in the same way, but it's held on a sort of stewardship model by Google and Facebook and others, rather than once they've got it, that's the end of it.
My worries, I have two big worries. One is the gender problem, which is one of the foci of this particular group. I think it's appalling that only, I think, 7% of computer scientists are women. Essentially, it means that the AI that's being created right now is almost all of it's being envisioned and developed by essentially young white men, actually often young white libertarian men. So that there are several problems all mixed together there. And that really this comes back also to the monopoly point which has just been made. I worry enormously about all of the AI and robotics technology being owned by a handful of companies, which wouldn't be so bad if they paid their taxes. And that really comes to the wealth inequality problem. It's a fallacy that the Luddites were anti-technology. They were not. They were very much in favour of the technology. They were anti-starvation. And I think in that sense we should all become Luddites.
The last session covered everything. So
thank you very much, everybody.
From gender to different cultural relationships, about ethics boards on big companies, data monopolies, who decides, how far can techies, how far should they be expected to become sort of expert in ethics as well, or should they be ethically trained? What kind of robots do we want to see in the future? Should we shout at Alexa? But we covered a broad range, but I think there are a few quite strong themes about everyone thought more ethics seemed to be a very good idea. I think what would be great on this panel is some practical sort of answers, because we all agree, wouldn't it be nice to have more women in tech? There's only about 16% of women in the biggest tech companies. Wouldn't it be great to have data people being more ethical? No one actually came up with a good solution about how do we do that. Wouldn't it be great to have the ethics panels of the big companies be public and the ethics advisors, and again there was no mechanism to do that. And how will the government think about this and these kinds of issues? And my final thought is, given that this is one of the most important areas of public policy where tech meets public policy, a lack of famous people thinking about this who we can actually name is shocking. So if anyone wants to put their hands up and be that person in the future, that would be really helpful. So Deb, if I can hand over to you about, just talk through, not channeling your inner Theresa May, but sort of
lucky this is a Chatham House rule, right?
How government is sort of thinking about it, and from the perspective of the new regulatory body you're looking at.
The report will likely come forward with a data stewardship body. Now, this is not a regulator, but a stewardship body is essentially something that can act as a leadership vehicle for society. It will not be part of government. It should not be part of government because, frankly, we're just not the best people to do something like that. It should not be private. It should be completely independent. I don't personally know where that stewardship body would sit, but if you imagine a completely independent body that sits as leaders of our society that can show us the view, the world, and the future for data governance. The second thing I'd signpost towards is algorithmic decision making, which the Parliament is looking into. That follows into the ethics debate, and that's going on or should resume shortly.
Ooh, I'm not really a woman in tech, but I can talk about women in science. We have similar kinds of issues. And I mean, there are definitely challenges all along the way. We know that girls drop off, women drop off. The higher you get, the fewer women are around. And I think it's right. I mean, one of the main reasons why I'm in science is because there's one woman in our field, and essentially I wanted to be like her. And so I think you're right, of the woman at the top, they're role models. We know this. We know this from science, we know this from studies. If you see people who look like you at the top, you think maybe I can be that person. And I think that's what we need in tech.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the fact is, of course, that we've all, whether we know it or not, have made a kind of Faustian pact, with the big companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and so on. So, the pact is that they give us cool technology, and in exchange we give them our data. And of course, we've only latterly realised how valuable that data is, because essentially that's what those companies are. They're data companies, and I think we do need to reevaluate that kind of contract.
What can you unpack that and tell me what does that actually mean? So let's say I'm a bit bothered about the fact my data is being used by a company. Yeah. Talk me through what you can actually practically do if you start to become concerned as a citizen in this area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, radically, you can, for instance, not use Facebook. Yeah. Seriously, I mean, I don't use Facebook. It's not obligatory to use Facebook. And just be more careful. I mean, I know it's hard, but and this is really where again the tech companies fail. They make it basically very difficult to set the privacy settings. So I think we need to really. It's just not on. I mean, we need to make it clear to the data companies that it should be easy for us to switch on, as it were, the privacy options.
When we click that terms and conditions box just to get into a website, we never read what it says. I mean, it's the length of Hamlet. I think most of those conditions that we've seen. One company you said it's a Faustian pact. One company took that literally and put an eternal soul clause, so you were giving the right to your soul, and hundreds of people signed up to that because nobody read it. Another company called GameStation said the first person that claims this prize will get X $1,000, and it took 3 months before anyone claimed it because nobody read it. So there is something about this idea of making it a very contractual relationship. So legalistically, the company's on the right side of what's happened, but in practice, nobody really knows what's happening. On the other hand, as you say, we are getting some freebies back. I mean, I love my Gmail, but Gmail knows everything I think, right? So there's some kind of odd things going on there, and clearly all of us do it. So it's not necessarily at the individual level transaction that there's a problem. It's the fact that, I mean, my data doesn't mean all that much to me, but it's when it's all combined that it's very, very powerful. So that's where I suppose, for me, it matters more if you can tackle it at the regulatory level of data monopolies, if we can make sure that no company becomes too powerful. No company gets an advantage so that actually nobody can ever challenge Google because it's got all the data that there ever was and no one can ever break in. So for me it becomes a competition law issue rather than a kind of what do I do with my individual privacy settings issue.
What kind of social media are you on, and do you worry about your privacy and data settings and how your data might be used?
Okay, I'm not on any social media at the moment, mainly I find it's a distraction and I really can't be bothered. A lot of my friends use it. I don't want to be forced to reply to people messaging me all the time. I find that really annoying. I just want to get on with my life without being pressured to like photos of people in places where I want to be whilst I'm sitting at my desk working. And
so I think this is where you can have ethical debates about sort of how did you do it, but the biggest ethics issue is the purpose. What's the purpose of the thing? So, and there are lots of examples, but to give one, there is an algorithm, a machine learning program being used at the moment to reduce the poaching of elephants in Africa. So looking at taking in the data from drones, using machine learning pattern recognition to then be able to tell is something an elephant or an intruder or a poacher, and then be able to swoop in to kind of stop that. So the purpose is the most important thing. And to give the converse example, there's an algorithm they use in Las Vegas casinos to estimate the spend threshold that you have, so that at what point will you say, I've had enough, and just at the point that you're hitting that spend threshold, somebody will come over and buy you a drink, and that's proven to show that you will then break your spend threshold. Now, that is clearly not in any way of public benefit, it's only of private benefit to that casino. So purpose is the overriding way of actually understanding ethics.
Thank you. Julie?
I think we cannot overstate the importance of AI learning our biases, and we need to write into regulation for business and maybe government how we can build that.
Thank you.
Developers and tech companies can be transparent about the data that they are using to train AIs and publish that so that biases are made clear.
Thank you.
As Josie was saying before, I would think that any AI used, if they become sufficiently advanced, should confer with or agree with the UN Human Rights Declaration, and also just conduct itself in a manner that respected people's privacy, unlike my Alexa. That ships all its data to the FBI.
And building on what Sam said, what are the real concrete mechanisms for safe, fair, and equitable outcomes for all parties?
I think there's a real issue for big companies who get heroised for aligning themselves with AI. They look cool if you're a big, legal company or something, and everyone goes hooray, hooray. And I think they are less good at the moment in actually articulating to their workforce and to their people who might be out of jobs in the future. And whose responsibility is it to tell the lorry driver then in 5 years' time they're out of their job, or the call centre worker they're out of the job? At the moment, I don't think anyone's taking responsibility for them. And companies are generally still being praised in the media for anything to do with AI in terms of outcomes. And yet I don't think they are proactively engaging with the potential loss within their own companies.
Thank you.
The thing you can do is join the Royal Statistical Society. Anyone can join. but I mean, seriously, two things. One is we're a community that's thinking about these issues, so it's a kind of professional development opportunity for the world of data science. But also we're one of the few active voices campaigning on this issue. So we've been calling for this Council for Data Ethics. We've been calling for changes, and you can add your voice to that.
Thank you.
As AI need massive amounts of data, and we have access to a lot of data, it's really about not cutting startups or companies to use that data. So that's probably a question for the government. But as we use data, it's really about consent. So people being able to consent to the use of data and the purpose. So if we have a purpose which is good and people agree for us to use the data, that's probably the right way to create AI companies.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing is that we need to raise the awareness around this issue and educate people. I was the only girl in my computer programming class in high school, and in a lot of my engineering classes during college and grad school, and I didn't think to myself that this is weird. I just sort of accepted it as, it's what it is. But that's not how things should be. In order for us to solve any of these issues, people have to know, and people have to make loud noises about it.
Thank you.
I'm going to be greedy and say two things.
Okay.
Very short.
Yes.
Number one, join the IEEE Ethics Initiative. It's completely open. Number two, write to your MP.
Wonderful. Brilliant.
But ethics is impacting the whole process from data collection to when you're deploying it. And so you're never done thinking about ethics. So I think that would be my message.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'll be quick. Let's hardwire ethics into everything we think about when we talk about AI.
Nice, I like it. Thank you.